Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. The NATO Summit in Washington begins tomorrow, the third meeting of the heads of state of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The leaders' meeting will take a special form this time. During the summit, the 75th anniversary of the signing of the alliance will be commemorated. Before flying to Washington, Polish President Andrzej Duda convened a meeting of the National Security Council. The meeting in the United States Capitol is expected to send a clear signal to the Russian president that member states stand shoulder to shoulder. And one of the points of the negotiations is expected to be the agreement of a support package for Ukraine. President Andrzej Duda spoke about the need to increase the presence of allies in our part of Europe and the ability to effectively defend NATO's eastern flank. Securing also and the ability to quickly relocate designated, dedicated North Atlantic Alliance forces to intervene and provide security if necessary. The NATO summit in Washington is expected to build on the findings of previous summits in Madrid and Vilnius. These include support for Ukraine, which has been attacked by Russia, increased production of munitions in member states, and increased defence spending. Poland spends more than 4% of GDP on defence. Poland is a leader here, but many countries are not meeting this 2% target. And in order for them to do so, this pressure has to be exerted all the time. And the way to do it is to raise these ambitions. This target should be set at 3%. Then there will be more pressure on those countries that are not doing it. The problem is that the actions of Donald Tusk's government seem to contradict the defence needs facing Poland today. The information that is reaching us about Donald Tusk's government's attempts to cut finances can indeed be very disturbing, because in times of war we should be spending as much as possible on our security and strengthening our alliances as much as possible. Because, as we revealed last week, a plan to cut defence spending, including increased munitions production, new equipment for the military and funding for the presence of NATO allies in our country, has emerged from the Ministry of Defence. I try to say that security is the most important thing, and in fact, at the moment, the most important thing is to roll up the state. Also in this security dimension, and this is the hard signal to let loose to Russia. After the revelations about the planned cuts in defence spending and the huge scandal that followed, it seems that the Tusk government may be looking elsewhere for savings. If we want to avoid a creeping fiscal crisis, at the same time preserve what is needed, namely this increased defence spending, we must look for savings in these large items, namely social spending. During German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's recent visit to Warsaw, Prime Minister Tusk talked a lot about Berlin taking over responsibility for the security of NATO's eastern flank, including Poland. What we have here is a Polish-German bipartisanship. On the one hand, Germany announces that it will take over responsibility for the Baltic zone, for the Eastern European zone. Practically, they will take responsibility for everything. On the other hand, Poland immediately agrees to this. I would like to hear the reactions of the generals from the Pentagon. Because today's Germany, in addition to the fact that it constantly has a problem with spending funds on the military, after abolishing compulsory conscription and reducing the size of its army and its equipment, has a weaker army than Poland. Radosław Jankiewicz, TV Republika. Day 866 of the war in Ukraine. Russian criminals have again shelled Kiev, including the largest children's hospital. The images of young patients being evacuated covered in blood are shocking. The Russian attack occurred while the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was on his way to Poland, from where he was headed to the NATO summit in Washington. Early today, several districts of the Ukrainian capital Kiev were targeted by a massive Russian attack. The strikes also hit a children's hospital. Tetiana, mother of young Edri, a little girl who was being treated at Kiev's children's hospital when it was hit by a Russian missile, ran out of the building holding tight onto Edri, her catheter still in place. We came here to the hospital 5 minutes before it all happened. We managed to get to the pediatric ward. I do not know. It is a nightmare. I do not even know if it was a missile hit or fragments of a missile. My wife has come here. She drove here. Then it all started. My son began crying, so she did not go to the hospital. She ran to the bomb shelter instead. Then there was an explosion. The car is no more. But we are all okay. There was not enough time for the baby to get scared. But you see what's going on here. No words, even swear words, can describe it. But what matters most is that they are alive. Never mind the car. We will buy a better one. All will be fine. A powerful explosion in the Lukyanivka district seriously damaged a business centre, several residential buildings nearby and part of a street market. Resident Tetiana Shevchenko was in her car during the strike, which was followed by several explosions. When the first explosion happened, the car just stopped. It must have happened somehow automatically. It just stopped. After a few, 2 or 5 seconds, another explosion happened. I barely managed to find my phone. After 5 seconds, there was another explosion, and we started running. There were no more explosions after that. There were fragments falling down everywhere, and people were running towards the underpass. Fruit seller Tetiana Testenko was hit by a piece of timber. I was hit by a piece of timber. I threw it aside, and when there was another explosion, I went to shelter at the underpass. I went down, and then I came back. The area, situated in the vicinity of the Artem plant, a manufacturer of aviation equipment, has been a frequent target of Russian missile attacks in the past few months. Russia rained missiles down on cities across Ukraine in broad daylight on Monday, killing at least 36 civilians and badly damaging Kiev's main children's hospital, in the deadliest airstrike in months, officials said. Air defences shot down 30 out of 38 incoming missiles, the Air Force said. 50 civilian buildings, including residential buildings, a business centre and 2 medical facilities were damaged in Kiev, the central cities of Kryvyi Rih and Dnipro, and 2 eastern cities. Meanwhile, Zelensky arrived in Washington earlier today to sign an agreement on security cooperation and discuss their expectations ahead of a NATO summit in Washington. Zelensky had a moment of silence during a news conference with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw. As of now, we know of 27 people killed in this strike. I would like to ask for, and I thank for this opportunity, I would like to ask everyone present to pay tribute to the victims with a minute of silence. During the news conference, Zelensky called on Kiev's allies to give a firm response to Monday's attack. The president said Ukraine was waiting for concrete steps from its Western partners to strengthen its air defences and protect its energy sector. He said Kiev was initiating an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council in connection with the Russian attack. Zelensky also met Polish President Andrzej Duda. Although the polls said that the right had won and the largest number of French people voted for Marine Le Pen's grouping, the vote-counting system gave victory to the far left. In France, consternation because a front whose leader does not hide pro-Putin sympathies won. What awaits France?
Here are the celebrations of those who probably do not fully understand what France has just got itself into. There will be no right-wing government because the French have opted for, among other things, pro-Putinism and left-wing extremism. Instead, there will be even more of what is ruining that beautiful country: more illegal immigration and the terrorizing of ordinary citizens. I think we have reason to be concerned. The election result does not reflect the will of the people. Instead, the decision was made by political weaseling. The authorities do not respect us. At the end of the campaign, President Emmanuel Macron sacrificed his own candidates in a desperate bid to stop the right from taking power. So even though most French people voted for Marine Le Pen's party, France's single-member constituencies and vote-counting system reversed the balance of power. The far-left New Popular Front won the most seats with 182, with President Emmanuel Macron's party coming in second with 168, and the right wing, led by Marine Le Pen, coming in third with 143. France has fallen into the exact kind of mess I feared it would. We're facing more years of illegal immigration, the abuse of power, and declining security. But we will survive that, too. The leader of the victors, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, doesn't even bother to hide his affection for Vladimir Putin. The far-left politician embodies all the qualities that political enemies have tried to ascribe to Marine Le Pen. Here are just a few examples. This is what he says about Russia. Russia is a partner. I don't agree with making an enemy of her. On Ukraine, shortly after the annexation of Crimea, Crimean ports are crucial for Russia's security, and Ukraine is under the influence of neo-Nazis. Mélenchon also called for withdrawal from NATO, saying that the North Atlantic Alliance was a threat to France's national sovereignty. For years, he has been preaching such controversial slogans about NATO, about Russia for example, that maybe Crimea really is Russia, and that maybe she could take that Crimea for herself. To no great surprise, the Russians must be popping open a champagne right about now. The reaction of the Polish Prime Minister may come as a surprise. Donald Tusk wrote on the X portal, "In Paris enthusiasm, in Moscow disappointment, in Kiev relief, enough to be happy in Warsaw." Professor Sławomir Cęckiewicz, a historian who studies Russian influence in Poland, replied, "Who is the Prime Minister of my country if he is happy about the victory of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, a communist, a critic of the EU, an enemy of NATO, and a supporter of Putin?" What's more, The far-left leader has surrounded himself with people who support the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas, which is why many immigrants with voting rights in France have thrown their support behind him. Macron has sacrificed his candidates to stop Le Pen and promote the far left. I think he has lost his credibility as a leader. From crisis to chaos, write French columnists, begging Macron not to appoint Mélenchon as prime minister. France would burn with shame. The problem is that it is the French president who has inflicted that very fate upon his countrymen. Marcin Szewczak, TV Republika.
Earlier today, strong winds lashed Texas as Hurricane Beryl raged inland, forcing oil ports and airports to shut down and cutting the power supply for millions. As the storm swept through Jamaica, Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines last week, at least 8 people were killed.
Beryl, the season's earliest Category 5 hurricane on record, was projected to come ashore early Monday in the middle of Texas coast around Matagorda Bay, an area around 100 miles, or 161 kilometers, south of Houston. But officials cautioned the path could still change. Residents were urged on Sunday to evacuate or take shelter, and told by officials to expect flooding, as what was then a tropical storm became a hurricane once more and hit land. Hurricane Beryl, which has begun to weaken as it moves inland, swept a destructive path through Jamaica, Grenada, and St. Vincent in the Grenadines last week, killing at least 11 people and toppling buildings and power lines. It is currently classified as a tropical storm and is forecast to move across eastern Texas and into the lower Mississippi Valley and Ohio Valley later in the week, according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center.
That's the news. Thank you for watching, and from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.